Alright. So we need to recognize, well, first off, I want to point this out. It says write an equation for the line. You cannot forget this. If you're writing the equation for a line, what equations are there?
Huh?
What are the two equations for a line that we've studied?
Point slope, and slope intercept.
Okay.
Wow.
Point slope and slope intercept. You have to know those two equations of a line. Those are two non-negotiables. You've got to know. We've done it since the beginning of this year. You also did it, there we go, last year in Algebra 1A. Whether you had Mr. Johnson or me or Ms. Anderson, you did this. Both of them. Alright? So notice we chose to use slope-intercept because we had the slope and we had a y-intercept. If you didn't have the y-intercept, which equation would you have to use? The point slope, right? You got to know those two equations. But you could have worked it out either way. Even with that y-intercept, notice I could have plugged the slope was -2/5. X minus, what is the x value of this y-intercept?
60.
The x value?
0.
0. What is x minus 0?
0x.
So that'd just be x.
X 0 minus 0, 0.
See how that would give me the same exact equation
You're not knowing.
as my slope intercept?
Yep.
That just blow your mind, Crow? There's just
Why y'all laughing at me, bro?
two different versions of the same equation, right? So we have an equation there. Alright? Please remember, every point on this line would make that equation what?
True.
Right, so if you have an equation, that represents a line.
Wow.
Well, if you have an equation with two variables, that is. If you have an equation with two variables, that is a line. Now, what I also want you to notice is, you'll see all these red points up here, right? Any guesses what those points are?
Those are not working.
Those are over the
points.
boundary lines. They don't work.
They are over the boundary line. These are all the points that were too
They're overachievers.
Too big.
Too much.
Too much, meaning they didn't have enough money for those.
They are over.
Notice, does it matter if it's close to the line or if it's really far away from the line?
No, it doesn't matter.
No,
It doesn't matter. If it is above the line, it was
Too much.
too much. What would be the language if it's above the line? The math language.
Then,
Greater than.
Greater than, right?
Obviously.
If it is below the line, notice how I use green for this, because it's good to go. It's going to be what?
wow.
Less than.
It's not.
Which that green does not show up well, but we need to recognize that all these points that were below the line were not too big. They worked for the constraints. We go with those ideas.
Yep.
Again, even if it was really close, it still was less than, so it was okay. So what about if it was right here?
Yeah, we're work.
It would work?
Yeah.
It's not too big?
No.
Okay. What about this one right here?
No.
No.
No, that one.
Yeah, above it.
It's really darn close, but it's above it, isn't it?
Yep.
So it's still
Not gonna work.
Not
too
gonna
big.
work.
Not gonna work, right? We need to notice it doesn't matter how far it is or how close it is it above or is it below, and that tells us a lot, and that's what we're going to use for the inequality in a second. But I also want you to notice this, because a lot of you struggled when it came to number 7. This equation is for the 1,280. Right? Weren't all of these combinations of cats and dogs for the $1,280? So you don't need to reintroduce the 1,280. We'll show how it connects to this equation tomorrow, but we need to recognize that that equation is for the combinations of cats and dogs for 1,280. Okay? Now, we need to talk about the slope of this line though, and what it represents. -2/5. If I'm interpreting this slope, what does that -2/5 mean?
Like,
Go down to.
Going down to what?
oh, fine.
What's on, but what is this y-axis
Oh.
representing?
Why?
Going down to
Dogs.
dogs. So when Carlos and Clarita decrease by 2 dogs, notice how I'm bringing in the context and I'm paying attention to what the axes represent. The y-axis is the dogs, so when I go down 2, it's down 2 dogs. Well, when I go down 2 dogs, what's also happening?
The line gets smaller.
Gain
I'm
5
saying
cats.
that.
Say again?
boundary line-
Gain 5
Gaining 5 cats. So when Carlos and Clarita decrease by 2 dogs, they can
Increase
take
that.
care of 5 more cats. Right? Now I want to point this out. Does the negative have to be in the numerator? So if it was in the denominator, in this case, what would that 2 indicate?
Going up.
Going up or gaining
2
2?
dogs.
Remember, if you're going up, those are the dogs. So when you're gaining 2 dogs, you are
Losing 5 cats.
losing 5 cats. You see how there's an exchange rate there?
Something like that.
Make sense? We good with that idea?
Something like that.
Is it original time?
No.
I was thinking the same thing.
Number 6 and 7, that's all we have to finish on. Shade all the points on your coordinate grid that satisfy. So please notice how we have a boundary line here.
Say everything under.
So we shade everything below the boundary line. Oh, one thing I want to make sure that you see, because I will do this regularly in the future, and it's better as well. Notice how you said shade below it, which means you're going.
Down.
I would always either put an arrow down or up to quickly indicate to yourself which direction you should shade. This prevents you from thinking left and right.
I just said everything.
Does that make so? I draw an arrow showing that I'm going down to prevent myself from thinking left or right. It will be very helpful for you moving forward. Then I know that I'm shading all of this region. Does that make sense? We good? But number 7, this is where we struggle a little bit. Write a mathematical rule to represent the points shaded in number 6. That is, bless you, right, an inequality whose solution set is the collection of points that satisfy the startup constraint. Well, you see how we're shading below this line?
Yes.
What was the equation for that line?
Y equals -2 divided by 5x plus 16.
Okay, but that equation is just this line. How could I change the equation to represent the line and what's below the line? What is this?
Less than.
Less than or greater than?
Is it a less than or is it greater than?
Less than.
Less than.
Equal to 2.
Can we equal?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we could either equal the line or we could be less than the line? Done.
Done? Wow. Done?
Wow, I think we worked.
Almost. Does that make sense? Okay, so one quick note. All right, we do want to recognize that could they spend exactly the $1,280?
Yes.
Yes. However, there are times when we would want to write it this or write this. Are they now equal to the line? In this inequality, are they equal to the line?
Wait, which one? No.
No. Notice in this one we're equal to the line, so we would have a solid line just like you would have a closed-in point. When you're not equal to the line, it would need to be like an open point. So what we would do when you're not equal to the line is you would dash it. You see how it's a dashed line?
Yes.
That, remember how with inequalities we would sometimes do an open point versus a closed? Well, a closed point means you could equal it, and an open point means you couldn't equal it. A dashed line means you cannot equal. A solid line means you can equal. Does that explain the difference? Okay. So that's just something to be aware of because this was not a part of this task, but it is a part of your homework tonight. But there's our inequality. We'll pick up number 8 tomorrow. If you need to go use the restroom, you can quickly do that, but I'm going to show you your homework, and I'm going to help you understand something about the homework first. So, 5.2, ready number 6, set number 9, and go number 12. That's your homework. 3 problems. Mostly because number 12 is a little bit
Good
longer.
Lord.
It's not nearly as bad as it looks.
Just for a grade, guys.
Yes, it is for an accuracy grade, but I'm going to show you one thing on number 12 to help you get started. It doesn't take long.
Shelby will tell
Don't
me.
lie to me.
It doesn't. It took me 2 minutes maybe?
You're a grown man.
More than 2 minutes. Huh?
You are not doing it already.
Have you looked at the directions to see what it
Yeah,
says?
solve for what? You write your inequality, that's inequality.
You write it as an equation?
Yeah,
You see how it's literally telling you exactly what to do every single time?
something like that.
Something like that. Okay, so do we all have 6, 9, and 12 circled?
Yeah, you skipped 8.
Is all this stuff, just for 12, the A, B, C, D, E,
Yes.
F, G?
I'm about to help you get started on it.
Elemental two.
Come on, man. How you gonna grade that?
You're gonna grade it tomorrow during,
Like how?
Class.
You like did like one. You made all the way.
remember, you split it up based on how many different sections there are. So this one question will be worth 33% of your homework grade, and then I'll count however many pieces there are, and then I'll split that 33 over each of those pieces. So it'll be like 2 or 3% per question. Alright. Notice in part A, it asks us to do what? That's part B.
Solve for what?
Part A says solve for
Why?
y. This is the y that they're talking about. What would I do to get started to solve for this?
Why?
Cancel it out. Cancel out.
What do you think, Desiree?
I'm gonna say subtract 22,
Subtract what?
22, but it does.
Subtract the 4. So notice that's a 4x though and a 2y. So we can't do 4 minus 2. But we are trying to solve for y. What's the first thing happening to that
I
y?
did multiply.
Being multiplied.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else happening to that minus 2y?
Nope. Just need multiply one.
There's nothing else happening to the minus 2y.
Oh. It's being compared to less than or greater than negative 2. I mean 6.
When I look at the left-hand side, there's nothing other than negative 2y.
4x, man.
There's a 4x, isn't there?
Yeah, it's 4x.
So the last thing being done is the...
First thing on the.
So what would I need to do to undo that 4x, the last thing there?
Subtract 4x.
So notice, Desiree, we do want to subtract, but we want to use an inverse, because what is 4x minus 4x?
Man, I hate this stuff.
Why?
Just this stuff. I know.
You just have to learn how to pay attention to what's happening so you can undo it.
But one mistake can mess the whole problem up.
That's
But that's why I also read with your mistakes when you make them, which is why you're supposed to justify your answers that you put on homeworks and on tests and on understanding checks. Now, what is 0 minus 2y?
2y.
negative
Which one?
Oh, negative 2y, my fault.
Why is it negative?
Because there's a negative sign in front of it too.
Right, that negative cannot just go away. You're literally subtracting 2y. Now, because of tradition, I'm going to put my x first. But what's the last thing I need to do to solve for y?
Hold on.
Sir?
Why is that a negative 4x?
Well, because I'm subtracting
Oh,
4x.
gotcha.
Let's try 4x from 6.
Mhm.
From 6, yeah.
So you could write it as 6 minus 4x. I wrote it as negative 4x plus 6 because I'm thinking about y equals
Gotcha.
mx plus b. So
Mhm.
the x usually goes first.
Yeah.
But you could write it this way, that's fine.
Then you can divide by.
Yeah, I was just confused for a second, but I understand.
Divide by what?
Negative two.
Negative 2 divided by negative 2.
So how would you graph it?
Well,
Negative 2 divided by negative 2.
It's 1,
1.
but it's still going to end up being 1, right?
So it is going to be y, but slow down, pay attention to the details. When you don't slow down, that's when you make mistakes. You got to learn to pay attention to the details.
So how do you graph that?
We're not there yet. Is there anything I need to do with this
You
inequality?
need to flip the direction or.
Reverse the directions?
Yeah.
Do y'all agree I need to reverse it?
Yes, I agree with you.
Why?
Because you're dividing by
Dividing by what?
a negative.
Right, we divided by a negative, so to keep it equivalent, we got to reverse the direction. Now, what in the world am I going to do over here?
You could do distributive.
I could distribute, right? We want to recognize that, or remember that division also has a distributive property.
It would simplify it as well.
What's negative 4 divided by negative 2?
Positive 2.
What is a positive 6 divided by a negative 2?
Negative 3.
So I'm going to put minus 3.
It's magic. It's
Ask the question.
What's your question, Desiree?
Oh, cause you put the equal sign. I was.
Oh, yeah, I just messed up. So notice with part A, y is less than or equal to 2x minus 3. But I will point out, Desiree, this is where it says rewrite your inequality as an equation. In other words, your solution will say y equals, instead of y is greater than or y greater than or equal to or y is less than or equal to. So notice it's literally stepping you through everything to do here. The next part should be pretty straightforward. What are we going to put? Y
Equals 2x minus 3.
and then graph that line with your equation.
How would you graph it?
Huh?
How about that now?
So would it be,
So you plug in 1, 0, and -1 of this can. All you say is,
Can you make a table?
yes, you can.
so 2x would be rise and -3 would be run.
Well, 2x wouldn't be the, hold on one second. You can always plug in your x values. You can make a table if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, this is 2 divided by,
1. And that's the rise over the run.
because I know it's y equals mx plus b, so I know that 2 is my slope. What is this -3?
And so,
The y-intercept. So I'm going to go to my y-axis, go down 3, and then use that slope. And you can check with the table to make sure you're getting the right points there.
you want to know it too, right?
Up to
And over 1.
the right one.
Okay. To right.
Don't say over. Because if you
To the
say
right.
over, could over mean right or left?
Yes.
So you want to say to the right one or to the left one.
How far this can?
No, it's not your fault. I just want you to be aware of that idea because otherwise it'll mess you up.
What happened? What did you do on the graph? I was getting my phone to take a picture.
I use my slope and my y-intercept to graph a few points.
You should get
So
that.
you'd start at -3, and then you go up to over 1.
To the right one,
Yeah.
because it's
Get
positive.
that down, sir. That is no joke. I guess can.